Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we getting on? So for today, I thought we'd take a little look at E3, with it being just around the corner at the weekend, and have a look at some of the things I'm expecting to see, some of the things I'm hoping to see, particularly from Bethesda, obviously, and also from a few other people as well. And I also wanted to take a quick look at the recent interview Todd Howard did, particularly as it relates to Fallout 76, although it was rather large and more generalised, and talk about some of my takeaways from that. So, E3. That is obviously kicking off next weekend and carrying on through the week afterwards. On Saturday the 8th we have EA's conference. That's at 9:30 in the morning Pacific time, and it's at 5:30 in the evening in the UK, British Summer Time. So Sunday we have Microsoft. That's at 1 PM Pacific and 9 PM over here. Big one, Bethesda, at least as far as we're concerned. That's Sunday night, that's 5:30 PM Pacific time and 1:30 AM Monday morning, essentially, over here, which is a bit, kind of sucks a bit, but it is what it is. Then there's Upload VR, which I know next to nothing about, admittedly. That's Monday at 9 AM Pacific, and that's 5 PM over here. Then we have the PC Gaming Show that will cover all manner of things relating to PC, huge amounts of stuff I should imagine. That's Monday at 10 AM Pacific time, just a little bit later, and 6 PM over here. And then Ubisoft Monday night, that's 1 PM in the US Pacific time, and 9 PM over here in the UK. Square Enix are 6 PM, 2 AM on Monday night, and Tuesday is Nintendo 9 AM or, where are we, 5 PM over here. Checking my notes there. So that's the main lineup for the big conferences. Obviously, to a degree EA and lesser degree Microsoft. Obviously the PC Gaming Show will probably interest me a bit as well. But obviously Bethesda are the really big one. So games that have said they're going to be there and I'm particularly looking forward to seeing more about. They haven't exactly said when, but CD Projekt Red have said Cyberpunk 2077 will be making an appearance. So I know there's a lot of people excited for that. I'm curious, I think. I don't know as much about it as I'd like to. I'm looking forward to finding out a bit more. They were there last year, so not massively surprising they're here this year. Will we get a release date? Who knows? But there'll be something there. The speculation is it'll likely be during Microsoft's conference, but we don't know for sure. The other big thing outside of Bethesda is EA have Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which they announced last year. It was in early development at the time. And we now have, I believe, a release date at the end of the year already. And that one's going to be obviously during EA's conference on Saturday, 5:30 PM for those of us in the UK. And where were we? That's 9:30 AM in Pacific time. So I'm very much looking forward to that. It looks like a very interesting game. Definitely want to try that out. Definitely going to play that. So that should be fun. And Ubisoft, sometimes they have things I'm interested in, sometimes they don't. But I know there's Watch Dogs. The new Watch Dogs game is going to be showcased in quite a bit of detail on that one. From what I gather, it's set in post-Brexit London, and, you know, given that I'm going to have way too much opportunity to live that if it happens, I'd prefer not to play a game about it, to be honest. So, the big one, Bethesda. What are they going to be talking about? What do I guess? What do we know? Well, obviously we know Doom Eternal is going to be the big thing. They've got a big mural on the wall in LA of a hotel, same place they did for Fallout 76, over the end of 3 buildings of a hotel. And they've been posting that on Twitter and other places quite heavily over the last few days. So clearly that's going to be their huge announcement, is to do with Doom Eternal. So my guess is we'll be seeing some more detailed trailers, some gameplay footage hopefully as well. That should be really cool. Hopefully we'll find out what new features they're building in. Obviously it's following up to 2016 Doom release. And therefore we'll... 2016? Was it? Yeah, I think so. But yeah, obviously as it's following on from that, there'll be new features to build on it as well, so that'll be interesting to see what those are. And hopefully we'll get a release date as well, but speculating on that, we'll have to see how that actually pans out on Sunday. So, The Elder Scrolls Online is very much likely to be there. It's been at every Bethesda E3 conference so far. There's no particular reason why it should change. The new expansion Elsewhere has just come out, the very tag end of last month, start of this month, so how much new stuff there'll be in that, I don't really know. On the other hand, it's an MMO, it's continuing service, so they will be pushing out more updates and doing new things, so perhaps we'll see some more of that, if maybe not release dates, maybe at least some teasers, stuff like that, so that's what I'd guess there. Wolfenstein, they were talking about it quite a lot last year, but I'm surprised to see that by this stage we haven't actually had the next installment in that particular franchise. So I would expect to see particularly Wolfenstein Youngblood, which is the co-op sequel to New Colossus, featuring the two twin daughters of BJ Blazkowicz. So for those who are more interested in that than me, I'm actually kind of curious about Wolfenstein, but I've never actually played it. So I would expect to find out more about that, hopefully a release date there as well. And they've got a VR game coming out as well, which I would imagine we'll see more of as well. So Rage 2, which I'm currently playing on stream at the moment, at least once a week anyway. I'm having a lot of fun with that. Obviously that game's in full release, so I'd be very surprised to hear huge amounts. They've already published a roadmap, so there will likely be some more updates on that, some more expansions on the detail of what's in there, hopefully talking about some new in-game events, that sort of thing. And yeah, hopefully we'll be finding out a little bit more, but I'll be surprised if it doesn't feature, although I don't think it'll be, one of the biggest things. id Software are obviously going to be there with Doom, so it makes sense for them to be talking about Rage while they're there anyway. So, other than that, both Arcane Studios and Tango Gameworks, who are the makers of Dishonored and Evil Within, respectively, neither of them have actually put anything out in a little while. There was some Dishonored DLC. Death of the Outsider was, 18 months, 2 years ago now? So that is a likely possibility. We haven't heard anything from them, but there's a lot of speculation around that I've heard as to whether or not they'll be there and what they might have for us. So we might get a few teasers on what they're working on next. But what that might be, who knows? Moving towards the big questions, the BGS games. Fallout Shelter and The Elder Scrolls Blades will almost certainly both make an appearance. There are rumours of new stuff going on with Fallout Shelter. I believe they've been doing some stuff over in China. So there'll probably be some updates there. It'll be interesting to see what they've got lined up for that over the next year or so. So I'd imagine we'll hear more there. And The Elder Scrolls Blades is currently in early access, so possibly we'll hear some projections as to when they expect early access to end and it to go into final release. Obviously they've been updating quite a lot as it goes. I haven't been playing as much as I was the first couple of weeks. Got a little tired of it, to be honest. Too many timers for my taste, which is fairly standard for a mobile game. It's pretty common practice, but usually we like to see Bethesda buck the trend with things like that, and unfortunately on this occasion they didn't for whatever reason, so maybe we'll hear a bit more about that. In fact, I'd be surprised if we didn't, but who knows. Part of the reason I would be surprised if we didn't hear something about some of the controversy around that is because they have lately been addressing, once again, controversies around 76, but we'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a minute. So, speaking of Fallout 76, what are we going to see there? They've made it very clear that the game's going to be there. Let's face it, I think we'd all be astounded if it wasn't. They are just about a third of the way through their 2019 roadmap, so we've got a lot to look forward to. Nuclear Winter is supposed to start this month. It's scheduled for the summer, and so far we know that it features a new game mode. It's going to feature high-level raids in the vaults that are already in the game. There have been a few hints dropped about a new vault that's not marked on the map, but is in the game. It's in the northern part of the forest. But we've seen some mysterious containers, and there's the body of Vault 56, I think it was. The body of the Overseer's there, and I've seen a few bodies of Vault Dwellers knocking around the Commonwealth as well. We actually saw one on the last stream? One of the streams this week anyway, up at Sunnytop Ski Lanes. So hopefully there'll be something around that. It'll be interesting to see what they're going to tell us, what they're not going to tell us, regarding what's coming up with Nuclear Winter. As regards the new game mode, there are rumours, leaks, maybe leaks, regarding what that might entail. One of those things I've heard is either a Battle Royale mode or a Team Deathmatch mode, which I think is honestly more likely than Battle Royale. But what I gather from watching stuff on YouTube, the leaks and rumours and so on and so forth imply that it won't be like existing games in those genres. It'll be, once again, the Fallout take on it, same as Fallout 76 is Bethesda's take on Fallout multiplayer. So it will be different, but it'll be in that sort of vein. Again, stressing it's a rumour, we don't really know what it's going to be until Sunday, but I'm sure we'll find out. The implication has been that it will be more survival orientated, as opposed to just pure combat, and it'll be slower paced because of that, and so on and so forth. I have very mixed feelings. I mean, whatever it is, I'll probably try it out. particularly if it's a battle royale, because I've very much enjoyed playing PUBG. Never been interested in Fortnite or, frankly, any of the others, to be honest. They're all faster paced, but if it's slower paced, then it'll be more in the vein of PUBG than the rest of the VR scene, although obviously with a big heavy Fallout twist. So I'd give it a go, but my outlook honestly would not be optimistic. I've spoken a few times before about what I think about the PvP in Fallout, and the reason I think Battle Royales work is because they have a level playing field. The major separator between any two players is skill. You've both got the same random luck elements, you both drop into the game with nothing, yada yada yada. So the big difference is skill levels with PvP in Fallout and with a lot of other MMOs and games like that. The difference is gear, which basically boils down to time and maybe money. But if you haven't got the right gear, you're at a massive disadvantage. And the only way to get that is through huge time investment or buying it from somebody else who has put a huge time investment in. So time there being the big thing. And that's why I don't think it works, because it provides an unlevel basis for the PvP. And I don't think that is likely to change unless it's a massive overhaul in the way they do it. So I'm not hugely optimistic about that sort of thing as an outlook, but we'll give it a go, we'll see what happens. Bethesda do occasionally throw us a complete curveball and do something different, so maybe they will. Who knows, it might work out. But I'm curious to see what it is. My personal hope was that it would be the effect of all the nukes everybody's been launching. There have been suggestions tying to Wastelanders, which I'll go on to in a bit more detail in a sec, that it might shift the game time forward a bit, maybe by a few months, maybe by a few years, who knows. But if you did that with Nuclear Winter, you could have the effect of all the nukes that have been launched, creating at least a localized kind of Nuclear Winter effect, or some variation thereon. That's what I'd like to see. Maybe make it a lot more hardcore. I don't know. Might be interesting. We'll have to see what they actually do. The reality is, leak or no leak, until Bethesda come out and tell us, we don't really know. So, interesting to speculate on. But the leaks have had a few sources, as I understand it, so maybe there is some credibility there? I don't know. I think of the possibilities, the team deathmatch is most likely, because we've had PvP events, just little localized events in the game early on that didn't get a lot of traction, to be fair. And there has been talk of team deathmatch, and even some footage of that sort of thing, or what that might be, has appeared in the past. So my personal feeling is that it's more likely to lean in that direction, but as I say, we'll see. So, Wastelanders. So far, we know it's going to have new main quests. Scroll a moment. It's going to have new features, new events, and Bethesda have said it's going to be a complete game changer and going to be by far the biggest update and overhaul of the way Fallout 76 is at the moment, out of anything they've done so far. Excuse me. It sounds like a main story extension, maybe closer to a traditional expansion, maybe. Or maybe it'll be another twist on that, but we don't know. They have said it's going to be a big thing, though. Some of the speculation is that maybe they'll start introducing NPCs into it. Again, questioning that. I mean, the implication that I saw was that if the game moves on a certain period of time, maybe people from outside of Appalachia will make their way in. You know, we know there are survivors in the capital wasteland. That's not that far. I mean, I'm awful with geography in the US, I have to admit, but the distance could be covered in a potentially reasonable period of time by the survivors if you move the clock forward far enough. And we're already talking 20 years plus since the bombs fell, so who knows? It's possible they could cover that distance to start appearing. But then again, prior to launch, they said, no NPCs, not going to happen, no way. Then again, they said the same thing about Battle Royale and things like that. So, given the way the game launched and everything, it's not that big a surprise that they might reevaluate some of their previous decisions, especially when you're talking about the last part of the first year and the last part of this run of updates and expansions. So, what that might entail is really quite open-ended up until we find out. But even as I say that, it's not the next one, it's the one after. So it's kind of possible that we won't actually hear much about Wastelanders at all at E3. Who knows, maybe all we'll get is a little teaser trailer. It's entirely possible it'll be very, very little amount released because they'll want to focus on Nuclear Winter first, as that's what's coming first. So, again, this is a speculation video, and I wonder what's coming next video, so we'll see what happens there. Yeah, the one other point I did want to add to that was that from the get-go, at E3 last year, the moment the game was announced, and ever since, Bethesda have made it very clear that the updates they wanted to put out to the game on down the line in the future were intended to be community-driven. If they're focusing on community-driven requests, it's not that surprising that things that they weren't intending to do might come in as well. So some of those changes might have stemmed from that, doubly so in light of the shaky launch. That just makes the community feedback and the community-driven changes even more important if they want the game to live on and win people back. So it is possible we'll get something totally unexpected in there. So moving on from Fallout, a lot of people have said, oh, I'm looking forward to seeing The Elder Scrolls 6. I want to see what they're going to do with Starfield. Can't wait to see that at E3 this year. I'm going to stop anybody who's thinking that right now and say, you're not going to see that E3 this year. You're not going to see Elder Scrolls 6 and you're not going to see Starfield. It's not going to happen. That's almost an absolute certainty. I will say with absolute certainty that I will literally eat my shoe if I see anything from The Elder Scrolls 6. It's not going to happen. That game is not going to come out before 2024, and we're not going to see another thing about it until at least probably 2024, possibly 2023 if we're lucky. Not this year. With Starfield, that game's coming out first. We know it's going to happen before Elder Scrolls 6. That is the next Bethesda Game Studios game. I don't anticipate seeing that any earlier than 2021. And they said this time last year that you need to be very patient on both of these. And in fact, in the interview Todd Howard did a few days ago, or that came out with him a few days ago, he said, again, don't expect to see much. You're going to have to be very patient. So, in short, I would be astounded to see anything from Starfield either. It's not inconceivable that we might get a small teaser for Starfield, but I do think it very unlikely. As for the Elder Scrolls 6, not going to happen. That's my opinion. It's in line with what Bethesda have said. And as I said earlier, they occasionally throw curveballs, but I don't foresee one coming there at all. So maybe that's unfortunate. I don't know. Given everything that's happened recently, I'd rather they took their time. It is what Bethesda do. Normally the games come out on about a 3-yearly cycle, which is why I'm predicting 2021 for Starfield, 2024 for The Elder Scrolls 6, and if you assume Fallout 5 after that, you're looking at, 2027 for that one. So if you have a look at the interview, which again I've linked it in the description, they have been talking about sort of possibly 10-year cycles around games. One new major entry in each series every 10 years or so. That's not a hard and fast thing, it's a speculative thing even within the interview, but it seems like a realistic way of looking at it, maybe 9 years, but they usually have about 6 years or so of development of a game with a 3-year period that's only focused on that game. So, you've got Starfield, started being developed after Fallout 4, but it'll really go crazy once Fallout 76 released. So, Fallout 76 came first. It's basically a kind of staggered working process, from what Bethesda have said. That's basically the way they develop games. So, you're looking at 3-year releases with a 6-year development cycle. Anyway, we'll get onto that again in a moment. That's why I feel it's not going to happen. That's where my predictions about the dates are coming from. So, speaking of the interview, and again, I'll link it down below, it's quite a big one. It talks a lot about Todd Howard's career in general, because it's an interview with him rather than Bethesda, or multiple people from Bethesda. So there's quite a lot of early stuff in there, quite a lot of his background stuff, and then it brings it up to date. Fallout 76, for obvious reasons, forms a very sizable chunk of that. I think it's one of the single largest chunks of that conversation. And as you can imagine, they did talk about the issues the game's had. I've seen quite a few other people putting reaction videos up and things like that to that interview. And frankly, from the ones that I've scrubbed through and the ones that I've actually watched most of, stuff like that, the reactions I'm seeing are the same rubbish that most of us here around this channel are sick to the back teeth of. It's the same old story of it's a cash grab, they shouldn't have put it out in such a broken state, it's not worth the $60, yada 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 yada. It's the same rubbish we've been hearing for 6 months, and it was crap then and it's crap now, is my opinion on what most people have said about it. I frankly think that if you actually look at the interview and really pay attention to the meaning and the implication of what is being said, rather than just layering over predetermined negative opinions, which is what a lot of people are doing, there's a very different attitude from Bethesda. The way they go about developing games, the way they look at games, their attitude towards it, their company culture, all that's very, very different to what you'll hear from a lot of other developers, or hear coming from disgruntled members of their teams usually. And I think it's being ignored partly because people just don't understand it, and they don't realise that their outlook is that different, and partly because, frankly, they don't want to understand it. They just want to carry on their let's shit on Bethesda narrative, if you'll excuse my language. And as you can probably tell, at the risk of getting ranty, I'm as frustrated by it as ever. So my takeaway from this is going to be looking at the other side of things, the things I think other people are either deliberately or accidentally or whatever ignoring, depending on who it happens to be. So the first thing that everybody seemed to ignore, and that I thought was quite relevant, is that there were some very direct questions about how, or points made rather, is perhaps a better way of putting it, about how rocky the launch was for Fallout 76. And there was a solid opportunity there for Todd Howard to deflect it, which he did not take. He just held his hands up and said, yep, we didn't get this right, we got a lot of criticism, and we deserved a lot of it. And given that he said that right after having an opportunity to avoid it, I think is relevant and good. I mean, he should do that, but given that he had the opportunity to avoid it and didn't take it, I think that's a good thing. There's an opinion I've held a long time, particularly about Bethesda, particularly over the last 6 months, that I think people miss, is that their attitudes to the game, and it's true of other companies as well, Anthem's another good example, although maybe not actually given some of the stuff that went on there, they focus on the game as a product, not as a creative work. Bethesda are the other way. They focus on the game as a creative work more than a product, which is why sometimes they put out something that people go, we don't want this. It's like, well, they didn't develop it for you. Sorry. They didn't. Bethesda make games for themselves, which is fundamentally different to the way other companies often do. They focus on the product they're putting out. Bethesda don't so much. They focus on, this is the game we, the developers, want to play. This is the game we, the developers, want to make. And at the end of that, we'll put it out as a product. And if people like it, great. And with the previous games, obviously they have. They've had their issues, but they've been overwhelmingly very, very successful. And it's, as I say, it's kind of the opposite to focusing on product first. It's focusing on what they want to do first, and then it just happens to be working. It could quite easily have not. Personally, I find it more remarkable that, given that attitude and that BGS philosophy, in short, I find it more remarkable that games like Skyrim, Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and the earlier Elder Scrolls games, I find it kind of more remarkable that they did as well as they did than the fact that Fallout 76 maybe didn't perform as well as its predecessors, kind of turning it around the other way. It's just the way I think Bethesda's attitude has landed. And I don't necessarily think it's the wrong attitude. I think it's one of the reasons their games are as beloved as they are, because they've got the life and soul of what the developers love in the game, rather than this is a money-spinning product, let's get this product out to make as much money as possible. So, it's more of a labour of love, and I think it shows, even if it does have its issues. When it comes to Fallout 76, Todd Howard said quite clearly in the interview, and he said it numerous times since Fallout 76 has come out, that they knew many people didn't want this type of game. And they knew that going into it, they knew it right the way through development, and they knew it after launch as well, obviously. But they went ahead and did it anyway, because it's what they wanted to do. They wanted to try something different, they wanted to take the series in a different direction for a change, see what happens there. And I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but it's not surprising, therefore, that not everybody is into it. Clearly there is a solid fan base who very much are into it, and a very tight-knit community that very much do like what they've done here. I count myself among that. But when you do something different, not everybody's going to like it. It's the way it goes. And it's the same thing with the critical response. Todd Howard straight off the bat in this interview that they knew going in it wasn't going to be a high Metacritic game. Given that a lot of their previous games were, buggers aside, It's interesting that they carried on knowing this and put this game out knowing that it wasn't going to get that kind of critical response, and did it because it was a game they wanted to make. So I think that's the big thing that underlies Bethesda's attitude and why people don't quite get their responses and their attitudes, because people don't really latch onto that, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but whatever. So yeah, with that big takeaway, there's a couple of other points that are interesting on the backside of that I wanted to point out. One of the comments Todd Howard made got some fairly ridiculed responses, some fairly, there's a word I'm looking for but I can't find it. A lot of people had strong negative reactions to when he described the game as being quite popular, and they have said a number of times that it's got quite a high player base, and a lot of people feel that where are they getting these numbers from? What does that mean? Doesn't make any sense. I got the impression from this interview, it didn't come out and state it explicitly, but I got the impression it's talking about people who play it at least once a month, probably consistently. But again, they haven't said exactly. But I can see why they got quite a strong negative reaction, given all of the backlash against it. But they've also said it has millions of players, and which can literally mean 2 million. But it's all been met with a lot of skepticism. And yes, most of that I think is based on the fact that the game has not had the big numbers that its predecessors did, or a lot of other games. But most of the games that people seem to be comparing it to, standalone games that have huge numbers of players at first and then taper off. A lot of Bethesda's games maintain surprisingly high player bases for a long period of time, but after the initial spike they taper off. To a degree, Fallout 76 has done the same thing. But most online games, MMOs and other games as a service model games, tend to have lower overall player numbers than standalones because they last longer and not everybody's going to stick around. It's not unique to Fallout, it's not unique to Bethesda, it happens across the industry. Now, if you look at some of the biggest BR games, the number of players they have, Fortnite's a bit of an aberration really, but the rest of them, the number of players they have are not actually all that high compared to standalone big launch titles that then taper off. So comparing them by the same standard I think is a mistake personally. So within its own sphere, success means a different thing here to what it does in another area. It's the same in most areas of life. Just because one person maybe has a job that earns less doesn't actually mean they're less successful than somebody who earns more, especially not if they're happier. So there are different measures of success, and I think that's probably a factor in Bethesda and Todd Howard in particular saying that they view the game as being overall a success despite its rocky launch, as opposed to the disaster that people seem to consider it. Is an interesting thought. If they went in knowing it wasn't going to be the huge hit other games have been, for it to do okay would therefore be successful. You follow what I mean? I think Bethesda would do well to talk about that a bit more clearly. It would certainly put some of the debate and skepticism to rest, I think. But at the same time, I think that's where that difference in opinion comes from between what Bethesda's saying and people's reactions to it. So there's another thing that was rather indirectly covered, which is why Bethesda games seem to have so much in the way of bugs. And let's be fair, we know they do. But with the most part, we love it anyway. Grind our teeth at the bugs, but we carry on playing because we love the games. And they didn't address this directly. But the most direct addressing it's ever had, as far as I know, was last year's E3. But if you pick apart what Todd Howard said in various parts of the interview, you can sort of figure it out, or at least form an opinion on the subject anyway. So what I think from it is that early on in the interview, Todd Howard's talking about the size of Bethesda, the number of staff they have, the way they move the staff around. They actually touched on the subject of crunch, which is a big thing at the moment, albeit somewhat casually. And that kind of gave a little bit more of an insight into the way Bethesda functions. If you look at most AAA developers, when they put out these big games, they have 1,000+ people working on the game. Bethesda Game Studios as a whole has around and about 500-600 tops people total. And so if they put every single person they've got onto one game, they're still way smaller than other AAA developers in terms of the number of people they have working on a product. So I suspect it's because they deliberately don't grow as fast as they might possibly be able to. They don't hire as quickly as as theoretically they could, because they want to have a more controlled, focused group of people. Todd Howard's talking a lot about the fact that the overwhelming majority of people at Bethesda have been there for more than 10 years, which is quite uncommon in the games industry. Again, that's in the interview. That sort of thing will quite naturally slow down the rate at which they can put games out, because less people, slower work times, or longer work times, whichever way you want to look at it. It takes longer to get the game done. It also means they've got less pairs of eyes looking at the game to spot errors and mistakes, and no matter how much quality testing they do, they're already taking a very long time to get games out. With a lot less people, they're gonna miss more, and then when you spin the game up for launch and suddenly you get millions coming in the form of a player base, it's absolutely inevitable that a significant number, and possibly even more bugs than you'd see from developers with larger teams, are going to be found by the player base. And whether or not that excuses it is a whole different matter. Maybe they should put games out even more slowly and test them for even longer, possibly. Whether or not that is a viable business approach, I don't know. I mean, Bethesda seem to focus more on making what they want to make rather than making it from a business standpoint, from what I can tell. So how much of the business angle is entirely relevant, I'm not sure, but certainly not entirely irrelevant. So I think that's where a lot of that comes from. And yeah, as I say, like as Todd Howard mentions, and to be fair to the interviewer, he quite thoroughly agrees, some of the biggest online games ever released did have really shaky launches. Elder Scrolls was the Bethesda game they talked about. It's ZeniMax Online to be exact, but that game launched badly and has grown over time. So did World of Warcraft, which is undeniably the most famous MMO of all time, had a really rough launch. And now look at it, you produce an online game, it gets compared to WoW. Just whatever happens, sooner or later that comparison is going to be made. So, focusing on the negatives around Fallout, yeah, they're immediate, but they're in no way unique. So there's a bit of my take on it and a bit of where it comes from, I think. So, and I know a lot of people are not going to be agreeing with me. Maybe they'll think there's probably going to be some people who just think, yeah, I'm way too into Bethesda and can't see it clearly. And personally, I think that it's actually the other way around. But there we go. So doubtless, if anybody actually gets this far and has that opinion, I'll be astounded. But, you know, doubtless I'll get a few comments telling me I'm nuts or blind or whatever, but that's my opinion, and frankly I think I've got a reasonable grasp of the way Bethesda think and act and the motivations that they have within their studio. So I just wanted to get that out as a kind of a response to both the initial interview itself, which was quite interesting, and as I say, I'm going to link down below so you can see it yourselves, and also as a response to yet another bout of crap that's floating around on the internet, frankly. So, as many of you guys have said before, you do quite like the fact that I don't jump on that bandwagon. I never have, and I have no intention of doing so. So, I figured I'd put my opinion out and my take on it. So, at least you got the other side available from somebody. Don't know how many people actually see it, but, you know, we'll see what happens. Anyway, I've rambled for much, much longer than I intended to, and this is going to take way too long to edit, given the amount of time I've got to do it in. Yay! So I'm going to wrap up here. We'll say thank you very much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed, found it interesting, informative. Look forward to hearing what you want to see at E3, what you're looking forward to seeing, and next week, probably, hopefully Monday, we'll discuss what Bethesda announced, what we've seen, and some reactions to it. So do watch this space for that one. For now, thank you very much for watching as always. I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, do hit those buttons for me. Social media links popping up on screen and are down in the description as well, so do catch up with me over there. Twitter and Instagram are my two personal favourites, so easiest way to get in touch if you do want to, or you want to see what I'm up to. Watch out for the live streams next week. They'll be picking up again probably Wednesday, and yeah, do drop in, have some fun. And if you happen to really like what we do over here, then if you could consider hitting the little blue join button down there and becoming a channel member. You'll get a little pop-up with all the various extra perks that are attached to that if you're interested. If not, thank you very much for watching either way. And I will be speaking to you guys very, very soon.